I remember this was the case with my childhood. Like I talked about being very abusive, but I've talked about how like there was a good amount of meaning there, so that I didn't process it as abusive at the time. And I remember after I got out of that house and that culture, people would tell me, "Oh, your childhood was really abusive," and I was really confused by that because it's a total recontextualization of that narrative. It's like the things that I went through were not, good and virtuous and had meaning, but rather those were like the result of parents who didn't like love you enough or something. And even though the concrete things that happened to me did not change, like no facts shifted, the fact that like the interpretation of the facts shifted caused me quite a bit of distress for a long time.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my God, I'm a traumatized, like abused person. Like I went through an abusive childhood, and it was really hard for me. It made it worse. Like it's crazy the power that terms have.
I think we didn't talk about this, but how did you begin to overcome the trauma of your childhood? You mentioned LSD, so were drugs a part of
Yeah.
it? Like, what was the mental journey of that?
I was doing LSD quite a lot when I was 21,
What's it like,
22.
by the way? I've never done
Really,
LSD. What's
it's
it?
very difficult to describe because it's like it changes sort of aspects about your environment that are invisible to you because they're so stable.
Is it like if you can compare it to like psilocybin? Is it very different?
Oh yeah. It's like similar. I forgot that you did shrooms. Yeah. Okay, then you
So,
probably know. Like the kind of shift that you have from sober to shrooms is roughly similar. It's like more clear, I think. Shrooms is more like embodied, but LSD is much more intellectual for me.
hmm.
It strikes different people differently. I prefer shrooms a lot. Sorry, LSD. I prefer LSD a lot.
Why is it not popularly take like there seems to be a negative connotation to LSD because like it seems to potentially have like a destructive effect. Like maybe dosage is more difficult to get right or something like that.
Just this exactly. So actually, a long time ago, did a survey on shrooms versus LSD. So I asked people, and people had slightly stronger experiences on LSD overall. I remember, but rated the experiences about as equally good.
Hmm.
But I think people like shrooms because it feels more natural, quote unquote. But I think if you like fed somebody a shroom and like actually had the LSD molecule in it, they would think it felt very natural. But that's beside the point. I like. I think people get kind of incoherent on LSD in a way that feels really alienating. Like I consider my LSD use very heavy to be one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, but I definitely was incoherent for a lot of it. Like talking about like we're all one, consciousness, everything is love, man. And people are
Why is
like
that incoherent?
so I think it's not incoherent. But like if you go around saying everything is love, people are like this guy's kind of blasted out of his mind.
This podcast is basically your LSD trip on the for a bunch of episodes. Yeah, I get this for sure. Oh well, it's not just about love, but it's about like talking in that way about reality,
Mhm.
about the world. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like overfitting.
Yeah.
The narratives that you make about the world become really vivid. And so you pattern match just really aggressively. Like everything is connected and you come up with these explanations for things.
Yeah.
And I think I was very fortunate. So I have like this theory about psychedelics where you either like belief construct or you don't. So you take psychedelics and it sort of like burns away a lot of your belief structure.
Mhm.
And sometimes this happens and then you're like, I need to like invent something to fill in the gaps. So you're like, okay, I think that maybe time is an illusion. So I must now believe that like we're actually in a time loop or like
Mhm.
time travel is possible. So you experience time differently and then you come up with a different belief about time.
Mhm.
Whereas other people don't do this belief construction at all. Like you experience time differently and you sort of let yourself not have a belief. You're not like, okay, I mean, you're not developing any beliefs about time in its absence. You're just simply experiencing the absence of the concept of time.
Right.
And so I don't have a lot of data to back this up in my anecdotal experience because I've tripped out a lot of people. People either tend to belief construct or they don't. And people who do not belief construct seem to get more out of their LSD trips. So if you can let a belief go without building anything in its absence, it's much more beneficial for you. And I think I just, for some reason, happen to have some brain that's constructed where I don't get belief construction at all.
So, oh, that's really interesting that belief construction is negative. What is it necessarily negative? Can you elaborate on that a little
But I
bit?
mean belief construction in a way that's like uh, not like playing with frames, but rather committing to a different frame. So I
Sure.
I like I like being able to play with ideas and be like, let's look at it this way or that way. That's awesome. But if you're like, okay, you know what? I took LSD and now I absolutely believe the cops are outside.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, no, you're just like you can't shift out of that, right? Like your brain like needs to fill in the gap. You're not allowed to have a gap, so you're not allowed to be flexible. And again, I don't think this is like a personal failing of any. I think this is like literally probably a genetic or like physical thing that's causing this.
But do you think there's possible beliefs that are like enlightening that you can stick to, like find a frame that like I guess if you don't believe constructing, you're escaping your previous beliefs. Aren't you doing like just some? You're picking up a bigger frame
Yeah,
in
I
some
mean,
way,
you're
in
taking
some
your beliefs
sense.
as object, as
Sure.
opposed to being subject to them.
Ah, got it. And some of that, I guess, is genetic. And there's these categories of people. There's two categories that experience LSD in different ways.
Yeah,
And
and
you're one of those that are able to just let go.
yeah, I just think I had a good reaction. And I think a lot of maybe the negative stereotype of LSD comes from people who are belief constructing or carry the belief constructing off of the LSD trip.
Fascinating.
So you take LSD and you're like, I'm believing these insane things. And people from the outside see that and they're like, oh my God, this person took LSD and became stupid.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
What's frame control? Because that's been at the core of your trauma, at the
Mhm.
core of your upbringing. What's frame control? And also, no, sorry, frame control in general, because that's part of human interaction.
Yeah, frame control is like a way of manipulating somebody else that is non obvious.
So there's a negative connotation to that usually.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think maybe I chose the term kind of poorly because I think to some degree people are always a little bit manipulating each other.
Yeah.
But I think it's generally obvious. Like, for example, if I disagree with you,
Mhm.
I want you to believe what I believe.
Yeah.
But this is like an obvious thing that is like visible between. It's like an object on the table. It's
Sure.
like here's the box where I want you to believe what you
The
want to.
disagreement box.
Yeah, so like right, like we're under a shared context where we understand that like we're trying to move each other.
Yep.
This is chill to me. I think this is cool.
Yeah.
We do this all the time, and it's important. But frame control is the kind of thing where you are trying carefully to obscure the existence of that box.
Yep.
You're like, oh, the thing that I'm doing, I'm like using tactics to try to influence what your reality is without us being both aware that this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. I've been assuming you're doing that the whole time. No.
Oh my
go
God. I have to like figure out how to read your facial expressions. I'm still learning.
There's none. There's not.
You don't have any?
I'm not even like a chat GPT. I'm like GPT-1 with my facial expressions. Like it's kind of off. Like this doesn't seem to match emotions, but it's kind of intelligent seemingly, but definitely not conscious. Anyway, so like negative connotation, manipulating,
Right.
not being honest about the actual intentions of the
Yeah.
of how you'd like to control the conversation.
And I think there like might be a naive version of interpreting this where you're just like, oh, I'm trying to like subtly get you to, believe like, oh, do you really think that's bad though? But this is not quite what I mean. I mean, there's like a couple like concrete things that are signs of frame control.
Mhm.
Like one of them is pushing the painful update button, which is this thing where it's like, hey, if you learn this, it's going to be really painful. The truth is painful.
Mhm.
And if you're realizing this thing about yourself, it's going to hurt. And this is a sign that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
So if you frame all pain as a sign of virtue, then this means that pain that's resulting as damage is something you're going to ignore.
Mhm.
So it's like this. It's a common like cults, right? This is for your own good. Oh, you've faced a brave truth about yourself that you're like not quite as wise as I am.
Yep.
When really your brain might be trying to tell you protective things. Or like another one is like finger trap beliefs, where the belief is constructed in such a way that doubting it lends proof to the belief. So like, very common example is like Satan. Like the Christians are like, Satan is going to try to make you doubt him.
Mhm.
The existence of, he's going to sow doubt, like maybe he's not actually real. And so if you believe in Satan and then you're like, okay, now I'm having doubts, like maybe he isn't real. This is like, oh, this is exactly what I was taught to expect. Like I am doubting this belief because I was told, because like this is what Satan does and it's taken as evidence for it. So like the attempt to move away from the belief, like rebounds on you and like causes you to be more embedded inside of the belief.
Yeah.
So it's like techniques like these, like very subtle things where like being inside of this system sort of just self-reinforces the system is what I consider to be frame control.
And have you met people that are really good at this kind of frame control?
Yeah, definitely.
So like you're saying that your father was like that?
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not sure he was good at it because I was a kid.
Right.
I think he's probably not very good at it actually, but when you're a child being raised in a house where he works from home and you're homeschooled, it's just kind of what's going to happen. And to be fair, I do think that like strong frame control is quite rare. I don't think most people are kind of doing something like this, but not nearly to the degree that gives me the ick.
Yeah.
I've met maybe like 5 or 6 people, I think, who I really don't like because of those very subtle things that they're doing.
But I think also I'm starting to kind of understand that there is people who are narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even sure if people like that, because I think they get good at frame control. but I don't know if they're aware they're doing it,
Oh yeah.
which makes me also nervous about myself. Like, am
Yeah.
I doing frame control?
Yeah, that's one
Like,
of the big things. It's like typically people, you can't think about incentive. Like you can't think about, oh, is this person trying to do it or not?
yeah,
That's like not the way. You have to look at
because
what are
you're
the effects.
pragmatically looking at the effects, and then you also have to do that with yourself when you're having
Yes.
interactions
Yeah,
with
you do.
others.
It's like very much like, are you like, how much space are you making for the other person's reality here? Like,
Sure.
are you giving power to the other person? Because a big aspect of frame control is you're carefully rerouting the power to yourself. You're like, I am the person who knows. I like you're having pain in your beliefs because you're updating towards the things that I believe. Like it's just like a gravity well. But if you're setting up the gravity well of your interaction such that you're making sure you're giving the other person power over the shared reality you inhabit, I think it's a really good sign that you're not doing frame control.
So if you're making room for them,
Yeah.
okay. Unless we're talking about in bed, then it's all general relativity from there and black holes and stuff.
Frame control, bed frame control.
Bed frame control. It took me a long time to get a bed frame. Just I'm saying.
Oh, but you wear a suit though.
Yeah. So frame control in the streets, no frame in the sheets. I don't know. I don't know what the funny thing is to say there, but there you have it. So the LSD helped you escape the frame
Mm.
of. Can you like elaborate what was the frame that was holding you back from, like, the frame constructed by your childhood experience that was holding you back as an intellectual, as a thinker, as a free being in this world?
Mm. Well, I was really fucked up. Like after I left home and it absorbed the external narrative that I had been abused, which technically is true. I'm not saying I wasn't, but like I absorbed this narrative and I just remember having like this burning coals in my chest at all times. Like if I had to call out of my factory work when Father's Day happened because I was spending the whole day sobbing because everybody's talking about their fathers. Like I was really messed up. And it's because I held this important thing, this idea, this frame that I had been deeply wronged. Like there was a correct way of being, and the world had violated that. Something should not have happened. Like my father should have loved me, and it was like this like the shearing in the nature of reality, and that was really agonizing to have. And LSD really messes with frames a lot. It takes like what you think is normal and really screws with it. And I've done LSD like several times before, but there's one LSD trip where I went through my entire childhood in my head because LSD like really makes your memories quite vivid. Like anything you visualize, it's like you're in it.
Mhm.
And so I just went and very carefully, deliberately went and remembered every single memory that I could have that was really painful for me. Like the times that I lost friends and all the things I valued and like being broken. Cause like my parents would, especially my dad would refer to like breaking me, like explicitly, we're going to break your will. And so all these times where I was like, they had successfully broken my will over and over. And it was horrible. I was just like sobbing, tears streaming down my face. And then I like worked through my whole childhood. I got to the end and I'm going to tear up because every time I talk about this, it's just like the sensation of like being free from that for the first time is so incredible. Like I remember being outside of my house and being able to like go where I wanted and think what I wanted. And it was just so blissful. And I was soaked in this gratitude on this trip. Just like vibrating with complete joy for everything. Like I was just looking around like I could touch anything. Like
Mhm.
I could cry if I wanted to. I wasn't allowed to cry. I was allowed to be depressed. I got depressed as a child and my parents were like, if you keep being depressed, we're gonna like force you to scrub the whole house. Like just like the ability to have a feeling
Mhm.
uh was so thrilling. And I was so grateful for this. I was like, I would do anything to give this experience to someone else. I would do anything, even if it was like putting them through what I went through. And then like with that realization, I was like, oh, it was worth it. The thing that I went through was worth it for this. I would do it again to like be able to have this deep gratitude for what I have now.
Mhm.
And then that shifted the meaning frame. Because before the meaning had been like something had sheared, something that shouldn't have happened. But now it was like the exact right thing had happened.
So it's almost a gift.
Yeah. I was like, I would not give up my childhood. I would do it again. And I believe that to this day.
For the moment of discovering that freedom.
Yeah. Because like everything now, my whole life is in contrast to that.
Mhm.
And it's awesome. It's fucking great. I'm really thrilled about it.
Is there part of you that hates your father still?
Kind of like I don't want a relationship with anymore. After that, there was some forgiveness. Like I had this burning. I would have nightmares about him killing me or something. And after that, it kind of stopped. Like the fire in my chest went away permanently after that trip. It was so fast. It was like before I was fucked
Wow.
up. After that trip, I woke up the next day and I was clean.
Wow.
It was really severe. And I definitely don't want to be around him still. Like he still like triggers the fear in my body,
Yeah.
but I don't have that hang up anymore. I'm like I'm over it. Like I've let go. He's his own person. Like ultimately he didn't get to decide who he was in the same way that I didn't get to decide who I was.
So that's almost like a kind of at least intellectual like forgiveness you have for him.
Yeah.
And that trip just took you through your whole. Were you alone, by the way, when you're doing the trip?
Yeah, I had roommates, but the trip was mostly alone. I had somebody else who was like sitting in the room, but they weren't interacting with me.
So you're sitting there experiencing all of
Yeah.
this. What's the timeline? Like, how long does it take to go through your whole childhood?
I don't remember. I mean, time's really messed up when you when you do that. I was listening to the soundtrack of The Fountain, which is excellent.
Yeah.
I listened to that a lot when I did LSD. I know it's probably a couple hours.
That's amazing. I mean, it's like, it would be, it's just like a vivid experience of your childhood,
Yeah.
moment by moment, trauma by trauma.
And it's good to experience it purely. Like it just is what it is. It just is grief. Like it is loss. And you just are in it without having to make it be anything.
And it's so interesting that you can, I mean, work through that. So for a lot of us, for a lot of human beings, like childhood is full of those kind of mini traumas, big or small, and like working through that. It feels like what a lot of life is about is trying to work through that. And it feels like you have to kind of relive it. I guess that's what therapy is about in part, and be able to vocalize it.
Yeah. This is why I feel really confused about the concept of trauma. Like people use this word so much, like, are you traumatized? And I understand why. Like this is why I feel confused about it. But part of me is like, I wonder if by using that term, we're creating the trauma in people. They were using the frame where the thing that happened to you was not supposed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe there needs to be a different frame. No, I agree with you totally. I've made friends with and talked to this guy named Paul Conti. He wrote a book on trauma. He's an incredible, brilliant psychiatrist. Yeah, he's probably agrees with your kind of.
Oh, that's cool. I should read it.
Yeah, you should. Maybe even talk to. He's a fascinating human being. I'd be interested in the a psychiatrist's perspective is really interesting because it's you've been doing kind of an in-person survey because you've done so many patients. Like he's like just talking to him is fascinating because like if I describe my experience or somebody else's experience, I could see his brain mapping it in interesting ways to the tens of thousands of like data points he has in his head, and it's like, of course, that's what doctors do, but it's cool when the doctor's basically the doctor of the mind, and
to have like an actual like qualitative data
and be able to. I mean, that's where the poetic stuff comes in. Ultimately, as a psychiatrist, you're exploring the human mind with a bit of a sort of romantic element.
Yeah,
you can't be really systematic about it, but it does seem like, frame or not, be able to just talk through the experiences you had is really powerful.
What about it is appealing? Is it just like being able to revisit it with new eyes?
No, I don't know exactly. It just seems to work for people.
Ah.
I don't know if it's appealing. It just seems like almost acknowledging to yourself that things happen. Like I've said, I think I've said this before. My brother, who I love very much, tried to set me on fire a few times. And I think to me it's funny, but I wonder if I didn't talk about it, like if that would be traumatic. Maybe like talking and laughing about it, because it was traumatic to me at the time.
I see.
I was like, "I love you. Why are you setting me on fire?" But it's what kids do when they're like, "Yeah."
I was
like, I was whatever. This is what boys do. Like they're crazy. It makes total sense. It was probably funny and from his perspective. But yeah, I wonder bring that to the surface if that helps. And maybe LSD allows you to, or different drugs, depending on the person, allows you to more vividly bring it to the surface. And then depending on your genetics, be able to find a better frame. That's fascinating. Human mind is freaking fascinating.